Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to check in with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representative Brian King and former Hinckley Institute Director Kirk Jowers. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Glenn.
Let's get into this COVID deal. A lot to unravel here, but I want to start with a big issue that has been such for years before today, and that is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Lee coming together. That doesn't happen often. But they're saying it's not good enough to hear about what's in the bill. Members of Congress need to see it and read it. And boy, we saw it play out in this one with a 5,000-plus page bill. All right, where do we even start with this? Brian, describe the potential conflict and problem here.
It's inherent to the process. What you're looking at, are, especially when you're talking about complex, big issues and problems, where there are deadlines and timeframes, where people need to be helped quickly. You have a ton of issues that need to be worked out between a body. Well, when you look at Congress, it's over 400 members, and they need to get worked out quickly, and they need to do it in a very complex, interrelated way. It's hard to do this in a way that allows every member of Congress, or 500 people actually, to read it and understand it and feel comfortable voting on it. We deal with the same thing to a lesser extent in the legislature. You put timelines in place, you try and make bills a certain size, you try and put time buffers in place after a vote's introduced, before it can be voted on. Those are all helpful, but they're not foolproof.
Kirk, takes us back to the infamous statement from House Speaker Pelosi the first time around, when she said something along the lines of, you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. That just does not sit well with the American people.
No, it doesn't, and like Brian said, I mean, they're absolutely right in theory, and it goes with my other theory that anytime you get kind of two polar opposites together, like an AOC and a Mike Lee, and they agree, it's probably pretty close to divine truth, kind of like when RBG and Scalia were on the same side of a court case, like, okay, that was probably a dumb one for that losing attorney to bring if you get those two. But in reality, this bill should have been passed weeks, months ago to provide the relief America needs. And so it is a little messy. Of course, this has been worked on for months, and so you've had subcommittees, you've got staffers. I mean, people have written it, people have read it, and they're relied upon by their legislators. So it's probably not as big of an emergency as it seems, but it's certainly not ideal, because one sentence, one word can really do a lot of damage or change a lot of the intent.
Former Utah Representative Mia Love actually introduced a bill when she was in office on this very issue, making it so that it would just be one single issue that a bill tackles. That is more along the lines, Representative, what you do at the state capitol. Yeah. Is that a potential solution? I
think it helps. It's no guarantee, though. I mean, we have really complex bills that come down with very little time for us to read them at the legislature, and it's a source of frustration. Especially when you get to the end of the session, there's a hard deadline after which you just run into a brick wall and you can't do anything else. My motto, more and more, as the longer I've been at the legislature, is I'm more inclined to vote no on a bill the closer we get to the end of the day, and the end of the 45-day session, if it's a complex bill that people haven't had a chance to vet thoroughly. Give the benefit of the doubt to something that could be in there that you don't like and just vote no. That's an alternative. But the problem here, of course, is that with COVID, people are really suffering. You need to get something passed if it's possible.
Okay, Kirk, the president putting this in limbo at time of recording, that was still the case. He called this bill a disgrace, saying that it spends too much money in foreign countries and on things like museums and not enough in the pockets of the American people. What do you make of the president's point?
He may well be right on some of those points, and of course Nancy Pelosi immediately said, yeah, you're right, great, let's just get that done and put $2,000 in everyone's pocket. To me, it's a lack of leadership of President Trump. If he wanted that, he should have. That's a place where there certainly were numbers to go along that route. He could have had influence when he, a week ago, a month ago, even a few days ago. I think at this point, it passed by a veto-proof majority, and it needs to happen. And I think McConnell and Pelosi will just override him, and we'll get what we've got.
Representative, President-elect Joe Biden is saying himself, look, this is a start, but there's still more work that needs to happen.
Yeah, there is. I think that you've got to recognize the economic impact of COVID. And in the end, what we've got to do is make sure that the economy is not going to be tanked by the detrimental economic impact. So, you know, you can call it stimulus spending, you can call it spending for those who are in the greatest need, whatever you call it. If we want the economy to be able to plow through this until the vaccines are in place and we're back up to 100%, you're going to have a way of keeping, especially those who are most vulnerable, from losing their homes, from losing their apartments, from losing their ability to make ends meet. And if you don't do that, then you're going to have real economic consequences. The Congress members do have the votes to override President Trump's veto. And he is not a team player on this, as Kirk said. He should have been involved in this process long ago if he really felt strongly about $2,000 going to every
What about
person.
Kirk's point, though, that Democrats are saying, yeah, we're on board with that. Let's get it done.
Well, yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is not a team player. He doesn't care about how that affects the Republicans. And in fact, that's going to divide the Republican Party in a way that for people who follow Trump loyally, they're going to say, yeah, what is wrong with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans that they're not willing to authorize $2,000 when the Democrats are the ones who have been much more in line with some of the things that Donald Trump has been saying.
Okay.
It's going to put a lot of pressure on Republicans for whatever Joe Biden wants to do next, because if that's part of the equation, that Biden wants to get more money into Americans' hands, now he's got an unlikely ally, and at least that point of the new bills that will come out.
Yeah, good point there. Let's move on to the Georgia Senate runoff. A ton at stake. I mean, we're talking the balance of power in the Senate and really in Washington, D.C. for that matter, because if it does swing, then Democrats will have the presidency and both chambers. All right, Representative, let's start with you. Assess what's going on from the Democratic side there. Can you pull off those seats?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know. I think it's an uphill fight. You're not likely to have the big turnout in Georgia for the special election that you had in the general election, and I think that's one of the things that may hurt the Democrats' ability to get this, to win both those seats. They've got two strong candidates. One of the things, though, that hurts the Republicans is, again, it gets back to Donald Trump not being clearly focused on what he needs to accomplish here. He needs to accomplish 2 Republican wins in Georgia, and quite honestly, I don't know that he cares that much. He's much more interested in airing his own personal election grievances and talking about how there's been fraud in the election. Well, that's not the ideal way to get your Republican base to turn out, is by telling them that there's been fraud in the Georgia election in the general.
Kirk, talk about that. What impact might that have on the 2 incumbent Republicans?
Initially, it was having a huge impact. You looked at the polling, and a lot of Republicans were saying they wouldn't vote in these most important elections in the history of the state of Georgia, at least on a nationwide basis, because of, you know, the perceived election fraud and other things that Trump had said. Republicans there have done a good job of kind of pulling people off of that, and that you do need to vote if you want to keep control. Fortunately for the Republicans, they only need to win one of those 2, and Purdue seems to be, again, no one's too confident in polling and anything else that's going on anymore these days, but Purdue looks to be in pretty good shape. The other one's a complete nobody knows, but if Republicans win one of the 2, they get the prize. They keep the Senate. McConnell keeps a check on Biden. And that's where we are.
Yeah, Purdue was actually just barely even pushed to this runoff in the general election, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Brian, are you confident you can pick up 2 seats there?
Oh, I think it's very, you know, if you said bet your mortgage on this, I would say it's tough for me to feel good about betting my mortgage on 2 Democratic wins down in Georgia, which is about as closely aligned a state as we had in the general election for the presidential. So I think there's a lot that's unknown right now. I think it depends on which party gets out their base and their voters and really motivates people to come out. That'll be the party that likely wins.
Okay, and Kirk, I think I heard you say you're pretty confident Republicans keeping at least one of those seats.
Because I'm not going to lose my mortgage, I'll say I would bet my mortgage that Republicans get at least 1. I would not bet on 2. But it looks pretty strong they'll get 1, and money's not going to be an issue. I mean, they will spend, the estimates some of go up to $500 million on this special election, which is just insane.
And that's money coming in from all across the country. Gentlemen, great conversation. Appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.